In our lesson today, we're continuing our series on the book of Ecclesiastes, where we're looking at some highlights from the book to see what the message is of Ecclesiastes and what we need to take from it today. So far, we've gone through 3 lessons here in this series. We've seen that despite everything that we perceive as being new and different and unprecedented, that in reality there's nothing new under the sun. We've seen that life around us and the things that we do is futility and striving after the wind. We've seen that this world is filled with evil, something that we can all look around us and is very apparent to us that that is the case. The world is filled with evil. And so just from these first 3 lessons, we see a very bleak picture about our existence here, about life and the way it is in the world that we live in. And that can be kind of depressing. And so what do we do about it? Well, what the wise man describes here in a few different passages, and we're going to notice a couple of them here in this video today, is that just when we look at everything that exists around us and all of the negativity and everything that we could be depressed about, he explains to us that we need to make the most of our time here. Over in Ecclesiastes chapter 9 and verse 10, it says, "Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with all your might. For there is no activity or planning or knowledge or wisdom in Sheol where you're going." He talks about Sheol there. He's talking about the grave. That this is where all of us are headed. And we'll talk about this in another video. That death is a certainty for all of us. But he says, knowing that that's a reality and knowing everything that exists around us, because he's already talked about all of the depressing things that we've covered in the first 3 videos of this series. When he gets to chapter 9, he's already talked about all of that. So now he's saying what we are to do is that we are to do whatever we find to do. Do it with our might. Well, what if the work that we have to do isn't personally fulfilling? What if it doesn't seem to meet our own personal goals and purpose in this life? Well, that's not what it's there for. He says you just do the best that you can. You make the most of the work that you're doing. You work hard. We're going to talk about purpose here as we go on in this series and we get toward the end of the book of Ecclesiastes. But our main purpose in life is not in this life. It's beyond this. And so what we do here in the meantime while we're here is not to just be depressed about conditions as they exist, and also not to think that, well, nothing here matters, and so I just need to look beyond this. We look beyond this life, but while we are here, he says, whatever your hand finds to do, do it with your might. Occupy your mind and your focus on doing the best job you can in whatever work that you have before you. Another passage is over in Ecclesiastes chapter 11 and verse 6. It's related to this. He says, "Sow your seed in the morning and do not be idle in the evening. For you do not know whether morning or evening sowing will succeed, or whether both of them alike will be good." He's talking here about uncertainty, that life is uncertain. And so he says that you sow your seed in the morning and you don't know if that's going to be successful. You don't know if that's going to be enough to provide for yourself, if that work is going to be sufficient. So you also sow your seed in the evening. He's talking about using our time wisely, being willing to work hard. As we saw in chapter 9 and verse 10, whatever your hand finds to do, do it with your might. But be willing to work hard, morning and evening, because life is uncertain. And so in the time that we have here, that's what we need to be doing. We need to be busy and active and diligent in the things that we have to do in this life. But also part of making the most of our time, which is what we are to be doing here and what we're talking about here today. Yes, hard work is important. Whatever we find to do, do it with our might. And making the most of our time is important. So sowing the seed in the morning and in the evening, because life is uncertain. There's also a place for enjoying life here. And in chapter 11, verses 9 and 10, he said, "Rejoice, young man, during your childhood, And let your heart be pleasant during the days of young manhood, and follow the impulses of your heart and the desires of your eyes. Yet know that God will bring you to judgment for all these things. So remove grief and anger from your heart, and put away pain from your body, because childhood and the prime of life are fleeting. He's going to talk about in chapter 12 old age and what happens during that part of life. But here in these verses, he's talking about childhood and the prime of life, when we're not generally hindered by the hardships of life and age and disease that typically come as we get older. And so he says, you enjoy your time here, not in the sense that, well, we don't have to worry about what we do as far as our accountability before God. God will hold us accountable for what we do. And so we don't ignore God's word or his standard. But he says, you enjoy your life. Remove grief from your heart. Yes, we can become depressed as we look at everything that exists in the world that is wrong and that is evil and that is futile. That can be depressing. But he says, don't focus on those things. Understand that reality, but don't focus on that and dwell on that so that you become depressed. Despite all of the evil that exists, there is good in this life too. There are blessings to enjoy from God. We have time here that has been given to us by him. We have blessings that we enjoy in this life. We have relationships that we have in this life. Enjoy those. Remove grief and anger from your heart, because childhood and the prime of life are fleeting. And so, yes, there is a lot of negativity. There are a lot of things that are depressing about life, especially if we focus on those things that are futile, those things that are evil. But we don't have to focus on those things. Instead, make the most of our time. Work hard. Be diligent. Enjoy the blessings and relationships that we have in this life. And always remember that our time here is short and life is uncertain. And so this is not the end goal to enjoy this life. We're going to talk about that here later in this series. There is something higher, a higher purpose that we have. But while we're here, we don't need to let the negativity and the cares of this life distract us from that purpose. So enjoy the good here and the opportunities that we have to be diligent and to be active and to find fulfillment in those things. That's not our ultimate purpose, but it is something that we can do here and we ought to do here. So let's try not to be weighed down by all of the evil in this world and the futility of this life that is only temporary. Instead, let's make the most of our time as we live here and work to serve the Lord while we're here in this life.